So we're talking about training teen volunteers, bringing that new energy to your library. And first and most importantly, if you take one thing out of this presentation, it needs to be this. Teen volunteers, it's about them, not your library. Okay? Teens are looking for a place to belong and a place to volunteer and contribute, and they've selected your library. They could have selected anywhere else, the APL, Big Brothers Big
Humane
Sisters.
Society. I mean, there's just, there's 1,000 volunteer opportunities out there now that probably did not exist for them 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so, like she said, if they're picking your library, that's a pretty special selection. So,
What's an ATL?
Oh, the Animal Protection League.
Thank you.
So libraries are community centers, so when the community flourishes, the library flourishes, right? So if those teens flourish in your library, they're members of your community, your library will be better. So if you want to think about it in terms of a long-term investment program, that's a good way to think about it.
something that Eli said yesterday that really struck me, and I thought it was fantastic and led right into what we were doing today, is that libraries are valued because they provide unique opportunities to their communities. And volunteerism is another opportunity that you can provide to your teens. I think that sometimes, depending on, the view of the library, we have that traditional shh, and that feeling that still permeates. And so when you can bring those teens in and show them, this is actually a really cool place. We have all of these programs, and then the word of mouth spreads and they're bringing their friends in. I think that is that unique opportunity and kind of gives you that grassroots PR, that word of mouth. You can't pay for those kind of things because that's how things spread.
Okay, so from interviews and surveys of libraries and librarians and teens who are part of teen volunteer programs, whether that's with schools or public libraries, there have been benefits to youth that have been identified, some of which, but not all, we have listed here before you. So teens will increase their awareness and knowledge of libraries, and they'll be developing new skills, something that they can add to their resume, something meaningful, right? They also develop a sense of belonging. We talked about, again, they could have picked anywhere. They've picked your library. They are welcome, right? They're kind of a VIP, like very important person / volunteer, right? It enhances teens' self-confidence, and they develop new relationships, not only with adults, which can be helpful for their later personal lives in the workplace, but they also develop new relationships with teens and working with them as peers in a work-like setting as opposed to a more informal, casual setting. They'll improve their communication skills, working with a variety of ages as they help in the library. And they promote a positive image and community participation for youth, right? When other people see teens volunteering in your library, it's not only good for your library and that your library is reaching out to other people, but it's also good for the teens, right? So that any type of negative stereotypes there could be about teens in your community is dispelled by a positive interaction with a member of that community.
Something that you have to consider with taking on youth volunteers, 13 to 18 or 20, 21, depending on your setting. If you're at a college setting, obviously you're going to get those upper teens into the early 20s. You have to be organized and prepared for taking them on, because the first year that I took on teens, I thought, oh, just come and you can help out. And I didn't really have a plan because I only have them 50 minutes as they rotate through, their school day, and they would give up their study hall and come to the library, and I thought, gosh, this is going to be more involved than I realized. And so the first year was that learning year of, okay, well, you can do this today or that today. And so I think hindsight, always being 2020, if I could have been more organized that first year and had a really clear vision and plan for what I wanted them to accomplish, I probably would have been able to sustain it throughout the entire day. Whereas it happened, it was like, okay, well, I really don't need volunteers every hour because I didn't have things for them to do. And it's because I hadn't thought it through. So part of what you want to consider is that job descriptions. You know, are they going to be coming in and doing youth services things with story time? Are they going to be shelving books? You know, breaking it down is going to be very important, because then that's also going to help them, you know, with this third point here, determine what task department the team will be assigned. I think placing them where they fit is important, finding that fit, because some kids, you know, prefer to shelf because that's a very introverted, isolated thing. But there are going to be other kids that want to get the experience of working with your children and doing story time because they're going to go on and be teachers, or, you know, maybe they want to be librarians and so they want to get more of the back office feel. And so they can kind of, you know, as you have the job descriptions laid out, I think you're going to find where each volunteer might fit or fall. I think this point too, deciding how to differentiate volunteers from staff and then creating a teen volunteer space kind of helps set them up as that VIP feel. You know, that they're there, they're giving their time, and they're sort of being recognized for that. I think it's great to have a t-shirt. You know, I think it's a really wonderful thing that when you come for your volunteer time, this is the shirt you're going to wear with your library logo on it, and then it can say VIP volunteer or whatever kind of cute, fun name that you want to stick to it, I think would be excellent. And it helps them feel as if they are a member of the staff and not just slave labor. I don't know that that's the right word for it, but you know, I think that it gives them that sense that they belong to your work community and their community as well.
And to add something to that, that also differentiates them from staff members. So that's not only for the teens, it's also for the community members. I mean, in a school, it's pretty easy to tell, you know, who's in charge and who's a volunteer. But in a public library, sometimes that line can be blurred, especially if you have younger members on your public or academic library staff. And so by having something that differentiates them, even if that's like a generic badge that says teen volunteer or library volunteer if you're working with a lower budget, that lets the community know there are people who are not employed here who are giving back to their community. But then it also kind of signals to them if they have a question, maybe that teen volunteer might not have the answer, right? Instead of approaching them as a member on staff, they'll approach them a little bit differently. Hey, can you tell me where I can go to find the answer to this? As opposed to saying, how do I do this? Because a teen volunteer may not be trained in that area yet. So it's also something for the community, positive PR, but then it also signals something to them as well.
And the last point, and again, this was something that when I started my program and just taking all comers, I didn't think about the ethical implications and that they do need to know the privacy issues that arise in a library setting. And so, you know, we really wanted to put that on there because it is a key piece for those people that are going to be interacting maybe with your Circ software or something along those lines, that they know the privacy laws and ethics of your library and what you expect. So.
And it may be something that if you're incorporating teen volunteers into your library, a staff decision. I mean, in solo librarianship, it's pretty easy to make your own calls, but when you're working with the staff, decide to what extent perhaps teens will be involved in the circulation process. Maybe they'll be involved in everything except circulation due to patron privacy rights. And that's okay, you know, every library decides it differently, but what's also important is that you explain it to the teens, explain patron privacy rights. They often don't know, you know, that if they check out a book on something that might be controversial or maybe they don't want their parents or their friends to know about, I'm not telling anybody, I can't tell anybody. right? And once they know that, they respect that. And then once they understand that that applies to everybody else, it makes a lot more sense. And then it also increases the value of the library, right? Because you show that as a librarian, you're not in a judgmental position, and so you're not going to be judging anybody for any material that they're checking out. Your job is to provide access to information. And once teens are aware of that, that is a very powerful shift in the way the library is viewed, right? Offering that unique opportunity. Well, here's that unique opportunity. Your confidentiality is completely protected. We did skip over one bullet point, and that was developing an efficient way to document volunteer hours. Just to go back to that for a second, again, it depends on your library, and this is something you'll want to think about. In a school setting, I just kept track of my kids' own hours. You know, I had a schedule, and I had to take their attendance anyway, so I know, you know, who was here and what days they were here because it was automatically in the computer system. Now that I've moved to a public library setting, we have volunteers who come in when, you know, some of us are on staff and some of us have time off, and it's like, well, how do you manage that? How do you document? Was Joe here this day? Was Sarah here this day? And what duties did they do, right, while they were here? Do you want to set up an Excel spreadsheet, maybe make it available in Dropbox? Do you want to do something with Google Docs? That way anybody on your staff can go in and add the hours and provide the description of what that volunteer has done. And then, do you want any forms that are official with your library logo on it that says so-and-so has completed blank many hours of service in volunteerism for the library? Like if you have students who are trying to fulfill a volunteer requirement either for their community or for a school organization, you'll probably want a way to make that document official, right? So it lends credibility so that the teen doesn't go back and someone thinks, oh, you typed this up yourself. Like, no, it needs to be professional, and again, that's a PR thing for your library.
Challenges. There are going to be challenges, obviously, to anytime you're trying to implement something that's newer, the concept is new. Teens are sometimes scary to people. I have people say to me all the time, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you can work in a building with 900 teenagers. Well, they're not terrifying, but I think the staff fears maybe not just be working with that youth or adolescent, but also, well, if they're coming in and doing my job, am I just going to eventually be eliminated because you're getting free help and I'm being paid? If the free help is just as good, then, you know, so I think as a staff sitting down and discussing it and what that role is going to be, and also assuring them that that volunteer is not going to be there running the library by themselves. You know, there are still going to be staff members there, and what they do is invaluable. And the teen is there to assist and be an extra set of hands. You know, sometimes things get crazy at your reference desk, and you know, I don't know how big your libraries are. I'm it. That's all there is at my library. My junior high library actually was run solely by a teenager most of the year this year. He did all of the shelving, all of the circulation. He did not run reports. I took that on, but that's what we had. And so when I wasn't there, he was the man. And you know, obviously that took a while for him to feel comfortable being alone, and for me to feel comfortable leaving alone, but training is the key. And so the other challenge is the maybe unclear expectations or inadequate communication. You know, again, from my first year of doing it, it was like, okay, we'll go shelve the books. Not all kids understand what that means. Not all kids know Dewey Decimal. Not all kids, you know, they're like, well, and I thought, oh, geez. You know, I just assumed because we do library skills and you've been through it that you knew what that meant. And so going back and, you know, sitting down with the expectations of when you come in, here's what we need you to do, here's how you do it, here's how long your commitment will be each day or each week, and here's how long it's going to sustain, you know, 6 months, a year, whatever. And then the communication aspect too, involving them, letting them sit in on meetings so that they feel like they know what's going on. anything else you want to add about the communication? You know, making sure they're on staff call lists, things like that, that are going to ensure that they're abreast of what's happening. And so, you know, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a situation without clear communication, and the frustration sets in quickly, right? So if there's inadequate communication and unclear expectations, why will they, you know, they're going to give up. And so I think the more that it can be spelled out and the more they can be trained and finding that fit, you know, for them as an individual will keep them coming back. So
I guess the only point I would add to that is that when it comes to communication, you're not only teaching skills to the teens who are volunteering at your library, but you also want to explain not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it, right? I don't know about you, but personally as an adult, I hate it when somebody says, do this. Because there's just this part of me, and maybe it's just me, but I'm like, why? Why do I have to do this for you, right? And I want to know why. And so do teens, right? So, and it's not to say that they would be aggressive or anything, like if you were asking them to do something, but by explaining why it is that they're helping with this. For instance, the library I had worked at previously, we were doing quite a bit of heavy weeding because it had been at least a decade since things have been weeded, and I'm fairly certain it had never been weeded due to the copyright date of some of the items we were pulling. But what had happened was a lot of those books were not in our card catalog because we weren't entirely automated. We were half automated and half not. And so the only record of those books existing was the actual card, right? Like the pull card that you would stamp. And so I would pull books that needed to come out of the collection. I would read the collection, and then I would set them on cards, and when the students came in, I would ask them to pull cards. And for them, that has no meaning, right? They're like, why do I have to open the cover of every book and pull a card? I mean, they would do it because they like me or, because I asked them to and I was nice about it, but they're like, this is the most pointless thing I have ever done in my entire life, and then I drop it in the box. If it's paperback, I drop it in this box. If it's hardback, I drop it in this box. I had explained the task well, but they wanted to understand why, and once I explained, we have no record of this book as being a part of our library or of us having done work in the library, right? It's hard to show that you've done work in a library when a book is missing. People notice when new books are added. They don't necessarily notice when you've gotten rid of all the old nasty ones. You need something to show. And once I explained that, then it was fun. They're like, look at this, and throwing out cards, and the work got done faster just because they understood why, right? Or if I had them archiving magazines, I had students manage all of my archiving. I didn't do any of it. Once I explained why we kept archives so that the consumer ed teacher could come in and take back issues of Consumer Reports, and they would do projects with looking at advertising and different types of advertising across different magazines and things like that, then they understood, oh, I see why it's important for us to keep those old magazines, not just to recycle them after a month, right? Maybe keep them for a year or two. So that's very, very helpful to understanding why.
yeah, and I ran into a similar situation, which I have my paid workers that come from work study, but I also have volunteers, and we'd have them stamp the books and write barcodes on the inside. And they're like, why do we have to stamp it on page 22? I've stamped it in the cover, I've written the barcode, and then a book came back with the entire cover was ripped off, and the kid said, I get it now, because how would I know what this is? I can look on page 22, and everybody, it's across our district, page 22, stamp, barcode, front cover, stamp, barcode, and so it's just one of those universal things, and it was that aha moment for him, like, okay, this isn't just busy work. Because I think that is viewed as, oh, you're just giving me the books to stamp because you need me to stay busy. And it's really an essential part, but they weren't understanding that. So that's a great point. All right, possible tasks. Rachel, take it away.
Okay. I would first like to say that when you accept teen volunteers into your library, public, special, academic, whatever, it is safest to assume that they know nothing, right? Best to teach and teach someone to do it the right way than to assume they know something and have them feeling uncertain, or worse, have them feeling confident they're doing the right thing and they're doing exactly the wrong thing, right? That's how nonfiction ends up in the fiction, and it just drives you wild. So explaining that when you start, I'm assuming that you know nothing. You may know some of this, but we just want to make sure that you're comfortable with our library's procedures and organization and familiarity. That kind of shows them, hey, this is beneficial for not only you, but also for me, right? Because then I know that you're doing a good job. And it's not that I think you don't know anything. I just want to make sure that everyone on staff is on the same page, right? And so you kind of train them the way that you would train anybody new that you're bringing on staff. How you decide what they do, again, that's going to be up to your library and your library's needs. I like to build from simple to more complex. Once they've mastered shelving, then we move to spine labels. Once they've done spine labels, then I teach them how to cover hardcover, then I teach them how to cover soft cover, then I teach them how to stamp and barcode. And basically, when I was on my own, between student workers and I, they did everything up to the copy cataloging. And then I copy cataloged and we pumped it out. And I did the weeding. They did the card pulling, right? So I tried to give them as much responsibility as possible. That gave them ownership. And then after they'd been taught everything from shelving all the way up through stamping and barcoding and maintaining the archives and putting the newspapers out every day, then after that, they could differentiate a little bit. You know, some of my students hate spine labels so much because they don't like trying to get it center and get it right. Other ones absolutely love it, or some of them love covering books. But only soft cover. They hate hardcover. Fine, cover soft cover books till you're blue in the face, because I have other things I need to take care of, right? So some possible things that they can do, shelving and shelf reading. Shelf reading is a term they're not really familiar with, so again, assume nothing. Circulation, again, that's up to you. In some instances, that's deemed okay. In some instances, maybe not so much for privacy concerns. Pull lists, I had them manage the archives. They love creating displays in my experience, right? Because it allows them to express their creativity, or they already know what's going on in the curriculum, right, in the school, because they're taking those classes the other 6 or 7 hours of the day. So they already know, oh, we're doing a Civil War unit. Can we do like a display on war books? Yes, you can. All right, so let them go ahead and do that. They can also prep for programs if you have something in mind and you need like things cut out or things done. Sometimes it's just nice to come in and have a relaxing day. If you feel comfortable with it, you could allow them to manage social media. If you're not real into tech, this might be a great opportunity to be taught by the team, right? And then they feel like they're giving you something, right? You're teaching them a lot, let them give you something. And then if you know this team very, very well, if you develop like a one-on-one relationship with them, and you know that they are very trustworthy and they would never put anything out that would make, you know, that would be bad PR for the library, you might entrust them to go ahead and tweet for your library, or to make Facebook posts for your library, or do Instagram with your library, right? Book prep and repair, again, I said they love it. Oh, they love, I don't know why, the teens that I've worked with and then the ones you've worked with too, love book repair. I don't know what it is about it, but that's great because it's time consuming and it can be difficult to do for you when you're thinking like, oh, I gotta place orders and I have to do all these other things, and they love it. Let them do it, right? And then they get to see like how books are made, and it's very hands-on. It's good for your hands-on learners, right? And then IT support. Sometimes I'll have students help other students in the library. So let them, you know, if the printer's jammed, or if this computer isn't recognizing this, or I don't know how to get a header or a footer in my Word document. If you've got a teen who's tech savvy, great. I was fortunate enough to have a teen who was really tech savvy, and we had on an AV unit what I call the black box of death. It was a computer screen, or sorry, a TV screen that would show a movie for about 47 seconds, and then you would get a black box that filled the entire screen except for an inch on all sides. And we needed that fixed, right? And I did not have time to fix that, and we also had no remote for the TV, so that made it a little bit more complicated. And so I said, Dalton, I present to you the black box of death, your ultimate challenge. And he spent 3 days on it and found a universal remote that he brought from home, and he fixed it. And I never had to spend any time on it. And he loved working on it, and I loved that he loved working on it, right? So there are so many tasks. Be creative and kind of allow some of that freedom. If you're in a public library, maybe do something, summer reading, have the teens come in and read to the younger kids, right? That's modeling modeling good reading strategies, right? That breathing, that pacing that teachers want students to learn in school, pausing at commas, pausing longer at periods, how to pronounce words. Those are all things that very small children need to know that teens can automatically model for small kids.
I would add too, when we're talking social media and IT support, and again, that's probably going to bring about some fear, maybe with your staff of, well, what if they post something inappropriate? Well, I always say, let's don't play what ifs. You know, that was always my thing. We're not going to play the what if game. We will put our trust in and our respect in that person, and they will in turn trust and respect us back, and they won't want to ruin that. I would even take it a step farther with my public libraries and allowing the kids that maybe are more tech savvy, maybe they can offer some adult programs on Excel or Word or, you know, operating the cameras, doing a camera class. Those kind of things are going to make them, again, feel very valued, and in turn, you're going to reap those rewards from them because they will, you know, then it's like, what can I do next? What can I do now? And, you know, maybe all of these things aren't possible in your library, or you wouldn't turn those things over, but as Rachel said, you start with those basic things, you build up, and then where do they fit? Where are they most comfortable? So I think when you're starting your volunteer program and you're thinking of your application that you're going to, you know, disperse, and they can check what areas they're interested in. When you have that first volunteer meeting, explaining to them, we're going to show you all of it. So the first week or two, you're going to be learning each different aspect, and then we'll find a home. Where do you fit in best? Because they might not know what shelving and reading shelves are, and so they go, oh, I don't want to do that. But once they see what it is, they go, oh, I can put in my earbuds, and they might love it. I mean, that's a very solitary thing that I think a lot of maybe the more introverted teens who are hesitant would be a good place to start. And then they might jump into, hey, you know what, I'd really like to help out with the program prep, or, you know, running the Cricut and the die cut and those kind of things that are for the more crafty people. I think that as they get their comfort level up, they'll each step into bigger roles, you know. So don't be afraid to let them be a little bit of a wallflower initially, because eventually they'll blossom out.
I guess two last things I would say is, if you're looking at this list and you're saying, I'm not sure, I don't know what direction our library would want to be, or yeah, this is a good starter list, but I'm not sure what else. Think about, if you were a teen, what you'd like to be able to put on your resume for your volunteer experience, right? And then also, by showing them everything and exposing them to more things, and if they develop that holistic understanding of how a library works and why a library works and the purpose of a library and everything, you can actually change quite a bit. I can't tell you how rewarding it was to have two students who worked for me come back and say, I really think I want to be a librarian. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. It's a viable career profession. You will really love it. Don't tell, I mean, you can tell everyone you want, but I mean, it's kind of an awesome secret of how cool this job is. Like, so that's really rewarding. Let them see all the cool things about our job, because we need young, exciting, fun librarians coming into the field in the next 10 to 15 years, and we need ones who are tech savvy too. And so by letting those teams do that, let them get enthusiastic about it, right? And who knows, they might change their major, but in the meantime, they want to be a librarian, which makes me happy.
So where do you find your volunteers? I think that in a school, obviously you have that captive audience, and so you can say, okay, if you have study hall and you'd like to come be a teen volunteer in the library, come down and see me, here's the application. But when your campus is maybe larger, your public, you know, any library, I think outside of a school library, you probably have to work a little harder to bring those volunteers in. And so using some promotional materials, bookmarks, website space, social media, you know, I always say meet them on their playground. So if you have a Facebook page and you can get the kids to like it, that's where you can start your campaigning for those teen volunteers. Consider student groups in your community, at your school.